Ready?
The stream is now live.
The meeting of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission is called to order at 6:30 p.m. Recording Secretary, please call the roll, I'm sorry.
Sure. Commissioner Durant?
Present.
Commissioner Weeks is absent. Commissioner Urena?
Present.
And then Chair Lubicic is absent as well. Vice Chair Maharo?
Present.
Thank you.
Tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 and our online platforms. To prevent any overlaps in comments, each commissioner will be called upon to speak. Commissioner DeFrank, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Once again, tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 and our online platforms. To prevent any overlaps in comments, each commissioner will be called upon to speak. This is public comment. This is a time set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the commission cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. If you wish to address the commission, please fill out a speaker card that is available on the back table. Once completed, kindly submit the card to the recording secretary. Speakers will be called to the podium one by one. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Recording secretary, do we have any public comments?
No public comment at this time, Madam.
Thank you. That brings us to item 2. There is nothing to approve for item 2. We move on to item 3, San Gabriel Historic Preservation Program after the survey.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm Jen Vermillion, City Architectural Historian. And now that the survey work is complete, there is, or soon will be, quite a lot more to do. And so there'll be a lot more to talk about. We thought this was a good opportunity to bring some education in the form of a workshop to the commission and to the public. We're envisioning a series of workshops as needed, of course, to provide information in small bites with the goal of maximizing understanding and building layers of knowledge. And we'll go into deeper dives into specific topics as needed. So let's take a moment to reflect on how far San Gabriel has come. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but in 1975, San Gabriel wrote its first historic preservation ordinance. And that's pioneering and groundbreaking because that even preceded the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act and the establishment of the Secretary of the Interior Standards, which were developed between 76 and 1995. In fact, we were the second city in Los Angeles County to enact such an ordinance. Los Angeles being the first. And then in 2017, after a 2-year process involving community input, the city adopted an updated and an award-winning ordinance to address modern challenges and provide a more comprehensive cultural resources program. This is what established the commission and the ability to proactively identify, manage, and preserve the resources that reflect the city's heritage. So over the last 5 years, we've been quite focused on the work needed for the first step, that is to identify. We completed the citywide context statement, and then we conducted a survey, and that was done in 2 steps with survey phase 1 and phase 2. You can see the dates there. All of this involved the public throughout every step of the process. We had regular updates at our Historic Preservation Cultural Resources Commission meetings. We had final presentations of each major milestone phase, and of course, City Council was involved, and especially at the end with final approval and adoption of a resolution to approve this survey. So what's next? We have definitely completed the task of identifying important historic resources, and now we continue with the business of managing and preserving them. So this workshop will review the San Gabriel Historic Preservation Program itself, and we'll focus today on properties, programs, and processes, and the people involved in the program. Some of the topics that we will go over tonight will require a lighter touch, and others a deeper dive. And select aspects will be the subject of their own workshops in the future so that we can really focus on them. So for properties, we're going to compare individual and collective properties, historic resources that is. We'll also compare historic districts and planning districts and do a bit of a deeper dive into what that really means. And we'll talk about the San Gabriel inventory versus the San Gabriel register and what the distinction is there. So individual resources like the ones shown here are able to stand on their own in representing the important themes that defined and shaped the San Gabriel historic context. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because of the high quality of the design. An individual resource could stand alone. The ability to represent an architectural style, a master architect, or an important individual. Could be because of the property type or the rarity, et cetera. So here we have the Bovard Wilson Hayes House, constructed in 1887. The Mission Playhouse, of course, in the center, constructed in 1927, opened then, was constructed over time, over a couple of years. The San Gabriel Village entrance sign in Fairview Avenue, in the center median there, and that's west of Delmar Avenue, and that's a circa 1938 sign. These all stand as individually eligible historic resources. So conversely, collective resources need each other to fully convey their significance and represent an important theme or a context that is usually based on a pattern of development. And patterns of development just refers to what we see in the built environment based on the unfolding of history or historic events that usually occur over some span of time. And that can include architecture and design as well as developmental patterns and historic events. It's difficult to fully represent patterns of development over time with a single property, as you can imagine. But whether individual or collective, to be eligible for designation, significant properties must retain integrity. And that is the ability of a resource to convey its significance. And we call that, in layman's terms in the field, the ability to convey its time and place. So for collective resources, it is integrity that marks the difference between historic districts and planning districts. So let's take a moment to compare the Rosemont Park Historic District on the left and the Central San Gabriel Planning District. As shown on these maps from the final survey report, you might remember these, the properties within the historic district on the left are identified as contributors and non-contributors, which is a fairly self-explanatory term. And for planning districts, the distinction is not necessary as it's not eligible for designation, so all properties are shown as equal members of the planning district. We don't make that distinction. But these are the final maps from the survey, and they don't really show you why one rose to eligibility as a historic district and one did not. So for that, let's take a look at a representation of the properties by date of construction, or really decade of construction. I know it's you can't really look at anything very clearly because it's so zoomed out, but the point is to see the distribution of development over time. The different colors represent different decades of development. So the time frame of a pattern of development, whether it's a span of years or decades, depends on the context that it's related to. It represents significant historic events or architectural styles within that context. Our citywide historic context statement identified 7 contexts. So, for example, the context San Gabriel becomes a city 1913 to 1930, or post-World War development, World War II development in San Gabriel 1946 to 1980. The survey ends at 1980, and historic patterns of development don't stretch into the modern period because then they wouldn't be historic. So looking at properties through this lens, we begin to see patterns of development emerge in the built environment and areas that may be able to represent those patterns. For collective resources, we are limited when considering the single property alone or looking at all the properties in an area without an understanding of when they were developed. So comparing the two again, we can only see some differences in this aerial view. This doesn't give me any information it gives me some information as to when they were built, but not too much. We can see just a few differences here. So the central San Gabriel Planning District is larger because it's zoomed out, so you can see there's many more properties there than in the Rosemont Park Historic District, but that's not so meaningful when it comes to eligibility. We see that properties are on smaller lots and they are on linear grid-like streets in the Central San Gabriel Planning District. But we can't see the potential for patterns of development, significance, and eligibility until we consider when they were constructed, how that fits into the important themes identified in the San Gabriel Historic Context Statement, and if the properties have integrity. So here instead are Rosemont Park Historic District and the Central San Gabriel Planning District with the properties identified by that decade of construction. And I'll put that little legend up there for you so you can see it much better than that first view. You can see a much more homogeneous picture on the left. Aside from some outliers, the Rosemont Park Historic District was largely developed over a shorter period of time, the 1920s to the 1940s, whereas the Central San Gabriel Planning District contains a complete mix of development dates from before 1900 to after 1980. In fact, every single color is represented within the Central San Gabriel Planning District. So there's 2 reasons really why a historically developed area may lack integrity and therefore not rise to eligibility, the level of eligibility. The first one is too broad of a period of development. And that can be because the area either develops too slowly, it develops over a greater period of time. But in that case, it likely wouldn't even be identified as something that has even potential to be a historic district, let alone a planning district. Usually when we see something like the distribution of decades of construction in the Central San Gabriel Planning District, what has happened is that we've had later infill and demolition and new construction has come in to disrupt the cohesion that we once had in this area. The second reason an area would not rise to a historic district and maybe be termed a planning district is that there have been too great a number and too major alterations over time. And so the properties as individuals and as a collective area has lost the ability to reflect its time and place and represent its historic context. So for sure, the first issue is at work here, and likely the second one as well. Last, let's compare the Central San Gabriel Planning District to the San Gabriel Village Planning District. The San Gabriel Village Planning District is even more cohesive, actually, than the Rosemont Park Historic District. So why is this not a historic district? Clearly, the culprit here is that second item I mentioned, inappropriate alterations over time. And we have a real opportunity in the San Gabriel Village Planning District to regain historic character and possibly eligibility as a historic district. And we can achieve that through community education, encouraging restoration work, approving sensitive modifications that are in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards, and conversely not approving inappropriate alterations, adopting a conservation overlay zone, and then ultimately drafting design guidelines and standards that will help move this area into greater historic character rather than less. Lastly, when it comes to properties, the inventory or the register, really the difference is designation. So after the survey, everything that was identified as eligible in the survey, because that was approved and the resolution adopted by City Council, that places all of those properties on the inventory. The register are our properties of designated resources. So that we do have some that were already designated prior to doing the survey. Those are already on the register. And any properties that move forward from being determined eligible from the survey to designated through a process that's prescribed in the ordinance, then those would be listed in the register. So let's talk about that as one of our oops, sorry about that. Let's talk about that as one of the processes to discuss tonight. So this is my cheat sheet for our Historic Preservation and Cultural Resources Ordinance. Happy to share the full version with you if you find it helpful. So on the left, you'll see in the first column the subsection that the heading or topic is covered. And then the detail is on the right. And so this is a gross oversimplification of, the details in the ordinance. But let's go through it. Subsection 153.609 for landmarks. This talks about the designation procedures in that subsection. Landmarks can be initiated by anyone. The owner is notified and can object, but that does not preclude designation. A designation form is to be determined by the director, as that is stated in the ordinance at this time. So we'll be working on that. The HPCRC and City Hall would conduct public hearings, and there would be a recorded resolution as an outcome if a property is designated. A notification program to let property owners know of those outcomes would be conducted, also notification program for those public hearings. And we might develop a marker program. That's, a landmark plaque type of a program. That's something that's not been developed yet, and that's to be determined. Oops, typo there, sorry, 153.610, historic districts, designation procedures. For historic districts, those designation applications are initiated by an owner in the district, or by the commission, or by any city agency. That's how that's written in the ordinance. A petition needs to be signed, and it has to have 51% of the signatures of the owners in the district in order to move forward. A public hearing is held by this commission to determine if we even move forward. Surveys included here because at that time that the ordinance was written, we hadn't completed the survey, but we have now. So if a historic district designation application wanted to move forward now, there's no need to conduct any additional survey. Now, in the future, there may be a need to do a survey update. It just depends on how much time has passed. 5 years is the minimum amount of time that would need to pass for a resurvey. Unless something else was brought to light that may have been missed or some sort of error in the original survey, there would be no need to do another survey. This commission holds a public workshop, and then additionally there are public hearings to hear the designation nomination by the commission and by city council. Once a historic district is designated, that's when design guidelines are developed. And then lastly, conservation overlay zone. This is for our planning districts. These can be initiated by this commission. There is no other mechanism or person or entity to initiate those according to the ordinance. The commission and city council, the commission would hear that and recommend approval or denial to the city council, assuming if you're bringing that forward, you're recommending approval. And then to move forward, city council would adopt that by resolution. And again, that's when design guidelines are developed after that happens. Okay, incentives. So eligible and designated are nearly one and the same under preservation law, except here. Why progress to designation? This is one very good reason why. Access to preservation incentives is a great reason. These incentives can be financial or regulatory, but all are intended to support preservation and ongoing use. And again, they are only available to designated resources. So I know we have some folks that were really anticipating the adoption of our survey so that they could move on to designating districts and individual properties to be eligible for the Mills Act. The Mills Act, you'll see, is on the financial side there as a preservation incentive. And in my opinion, this is the very best local incentive for historic preservation. It's a public-private partnership, and it's a huge statement in support of historic preservation. It's a state act administered at the local level, and it allows owners of designated cultural resources to receive a reduction in their property taxes in exchange for a commitment to complete specific repair, restoration, and or rehabilitation projects, and ongoing maintenance, of course, in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior's standards and other applicable design guidelines once those are developed. To put it simply, property tax dollars are redirected directly into a property's maintenance, repair, restoration work. It's put in place through a 10-year renewable contract, and it is recorded on the deed. So that's an important distinction. Actually, let me clarify both of those points. The 10-year renewable contract does not mean that it lasts for 10 years and at that time you renew for another 10 years. It's a rolling 10-year renewable contract. So every year it pushes out the expiration date another year. And recorded on the deed is significant because it's tied to the property, not the person, not the owner, so that it's carried with the land. So if a property owner sells the house, that next owner buys a house with a Mills Act contract. So that's a great incentive and something already put in place. It continues after the property is sold. Okay, this is a bit more involved table here, matrix. Again, this is looking at our processes under our Historic Preservation Cultural Resource Ordinance. This is going to be a quick slide on design review only because we'll cover this topic in a future workshop. So I'd like to cover that quite deeply with you in a future workshop where it deserves to be covered. So we'll just point out a few highlights here today. Okay, so under subsection 154, did I have that wrong this whole time? Was it 154 or 153? Sorry. 0.614. These are the types of projects that require minor administrative type of review, major review by the commission, or on the left highlighted area that are exempt from review. So exempt projects include paint color, no permit repairs and maintenance. That's just to mean repairs and maintenance that don't require you to pull a permit. Landscape and hardscape changes. The CDF there means character defining features. So work on landscape or hardscape that do not involve character defining features. Interior work under the same caveat, not character defining features. And screen or awning replacement, as long as that's done in kind. And then for the minor ones, you can read those there, but removal of non-character defining features, re-roof in kind, replacing windows in kind. And when we say in kind, it's like for like wood windows for wood windows, same operation, etc. Foundation work, landscape and hardscape, exterior repaint and lighting, repair, replacement in kind. Add or remove canopies or awnings, and rear additions up to 150 square feet. So that gives folks some leeway there to have something small addition on the rear with an administrative minor review. So that kind of leaves everything else. Those are well defined, and that leaves everything else to major. And that would be a review by the commission. And so any major alteration that's not on the other lists, relocation, historic district infill, that's new construction on vacant lots in a historic district, or the addition of something in a historic district. Demolition probably maybe should be listed there, but it actually has its own section. That's why it's not. So that's not to say demolition does not come to the commission. It does. You can see that later on. Okay, so the next section, just to glance over real quickly, is this minor and major reviews. So this tells us what the minor and major reviews entail. But just the thing I want you to notice here is that 1, 2, and 3 are the exact same in both categories. So the same findings have to be made in order for a project to be approved. The changes must be in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards and any applicable city design guidelines. There has to be no significant impact under CEQA if that is applicable. And it must be consistent with the general plan and this ordinance. And then the only thing that's different here is that, well, we know it's different. If it's minor, it's administratively reviewed by staff. If it's major, it comes to the commission. But also there's this early stage conceptual plan review by staff or the HPCRC, the commission, that is, that's optional. And then, of course, anything coming to the commission as design review would include a public meeting or public hearing. Okay, and then next area, just to note, oh, I already said that, they're identical. And I did, of course, overly simplify those. 1 and 2 don't read like that in the ordinance, but that is what it boils down to. So just as a simple version for you. And lastly, this covers inventory properties. So all the up above was register properties. Those are designated properties. But inventory properties do go through some review, and you can see there the conditions why. So that's admin review by staff, and those are for major alterations, relocation, and a potential historic district infill. Process and findings are to be determined by the director, so those were not yet set in the ordinance. Now that the survey is completed, that's another task we'll be moving on to. And lastly, this is the demolition section, .621. A certificate of demolition has to be issued. This is a full public hearing with the commission, and there is also this waiting period that's also imposed with demolition. So we will again go over more of this in another workshop. This is to go over the highlights so that you know, sort of have that in your mind and what's to come. Okay, so the St. Gabriel Historic Preservation Program is managed under the Community Development Department and specifically the Planning Division. You might be able to guess at this yourself as we've gone through, but the people involved include applicants, staff, consultants, and the commission, and of course I also mean the City Council as well in that. We all have an important role to play in managing and preserving our irreplaceable cultural resources. And as you look through those lists there, we don't have to say them all out loud, but you can see some commonalities among all 4, but particularly note that we are all responsible for ensuring compliance with preservation regulations. We all play a part in that, so it's extremely important to understand what those regulations say. And lastly, there's us. As a city architectural historian, I am fully qualified under the Secretary of the Interior standards and have over 25 years of experience in the field. So I have been and will continue to apply and provide technical guidance and preservation expertise to staff, the commission, and city council to support the execution of your duties under the HPCR ordinance, as well as any state and federal regulations as applicable, and as well as manage our historic preservation program. As this is a workshop, I would be glad to answer any questions that have come up during the presentation and facilitate further discussion on any of the topics we've covered today, which those are listed here. And also, I would love to hear your suggestions and requests for topics for future workshops. And thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we'll ask commissioners for comments. Commissioner DeVrent.
Thank you for that presentation. This is very exciting that we're moving forward on this and having these workshops is great. So to give us more education on that, so appreciate it. A couple of questions, and I think so. On the you mentioned something, and this is something that I wanted to ask. So the San Gabriel Village, for instance. You said it could be brought back into compliance, with minor alterations or something like that, to that degree. Did I understand that right? Like a district can be brought back into a historical district, is that correct?
Yes, it depends, though, on the existing conditions. So I do need to, get out there and take a look at this myself, and go into a deeper review of the survey and why their findings were what they were. But just from looking at it in this view here and seeing how homogeneous it is, I can see that the issue is not this broad period of development. That is harder to reverse and come back from, and have a planning district elevated to a historic district. But if we have everything, most of everything developed during the period of significance, then it suggests that we have inappropriate alterations, too many alterations, major alterations, and some of those could undergo restoration. It depends on the reversibility of those and what a property owner wants to do. So this is where education really comes in. Also, things like the Mills Act are not available to people that with properties that are not designated. And this might be a very attractive program to people in our historic districts and planning districts. And so to encourage restoration in that way so that those tools become available to people is something that might be very favorable. And then lastly, that's dealing with existing alterations. The other thing where we have, input on is if projects come forward that have changes that are inappropriate or not in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards. This is where, as a city, if we value historic preservation and we want to see a return to character in these planning districts, this village, St. Gabriel Village, is where we have the greatest potential to actually have a planning district become eligible as a historic district by making the right choices there.
Okay, and with that, I would assume it would be a pretty significant amount of those structures would have to be changed. I can't remember what the number is to be a historical district. It was like 80%. Was that correct?
Yeah, actually, the ordinance, if I'm not wrong, Sam, believe the ordinance is 51%. Is that correct?
Yes, I think this was one of the items that was clarified during the hearing, that coincidentally, to qualify as a district is 51%, and also to nominate an area to be a district is also the requirement of 50% signature within the boundaries of the district.
So that's to become a district, but to even be designated, it's a larger number, correct?
Actually, it's the same, and that's what that's what Sam was just pointing out. It is a terribly confusing thing to have the same number there, but it is the same. And 51% is quite a low threshold in terms of industry standards. We have a lot of cities in Southern California that have a higher threshold.
Okay.
So they may require 60, 70, 80%. Ours is a fairly low number. So I will look back on the survey results and see where we're at on that percentage. We are 51% or over, but where are we? And what are the nature of the alterations? How reversible are they? Are we talking that people have enclosed areas on the facade? Have we changed out windows? Have we changed window openings? That's a different situation. Have we stuccoed over siding? These are the, major alterations I would be looking at.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then I had a question on, just a clarifying question on, it's page 9, I believe, but slide 18. So on the, so just so that I understand so when a property gets,
This one?
no, this one here, the programs and processes designation.
Sorry.
Be easier to see with my eyes.
Almost there.
Almost there, yeah.
Okay.
That's it. So when, let's just say the Rosemont district, right, for instance, just as an idea, exempt from, once it gets designated as a historical district, somebody wants to paint, do the landscaping that are listed there, those are exempt. They can go ahead and do those things without coming to the commission. Once you start getting into the next level over here, what did defining features?
Character defining features, yeah.
Providing features. So if they go into any of the major ones, I understand, but, so re-roofing, for instance, not only is that only the city permitting that has to go there, but is there an extra permit because it's in a historical district? And how much longer does that add to the process?
Sure. Good questions. So first of all, the exempt column there, they don't even have to have an administrative review or anything. There's no
Okay.
application, there's no talking to any staff or the commission. They can do the work under the exempt column, without any entitlement or permit. Under the minor column and the major column, some things require, obviously the major would require permits, but some things in the minor column require a permit, and that's a separate process from the planning entitlement process. So someone wanting to say re-roof in kind. They would go to the planning counter first and go through an entitlement process that would be a minor administrative review. And that could take a couple of different forms. Some cities do it where they would stamp plans over the counter and then send you to building and safety to get your permit.
Okay.
Another situation could be not as fast, easy. It might be a bit more complex where they need to study that a little bit, but still that happens at an administrative staff level. Then you get your entitlement, which is the approval to do what you're asking to do, and then you go get a permit if a permit is required. It may not be.
Okay.
And then conversely, re-roof in kind is where you're like for like. Say you have a red barrel clay tile roof, you're just changing that out. That's in kind and that's administrative. But say you have a barrel clay tile roof and you want composition shingle, or you have comp shingle and you want to put tile on there. That's first of all a major alteration, and we require the higher level entitlement process, which is the commission. And on top of that, of course, you have a re-roof permit, and if you were doing something like that, building and safety would want to study that on a structural level to make sure your roof could withstand the weight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay, and I could give my house just falls just outside of the Rosemont Historical District, but, at some point I removed the cedar because it was bad and put shingles on there. So let's use that as an example. I went through the city, got those permits and everything like that just for that. If it was on the Historical District and I wanted to change those, right, because the house was the cedar at that time, and I want to go to the composite shingles or whatever for fire safety, whatever. I gotta go through the planning commission, not planning commission, I'm sorry, the permits here. Then do I have to come before this committee as well to do that?
This is the one and only example that's a little bit tricky because basically we really don't roof in cedar shingle anymore. Very few rare examples and exceptions. I can literally think of one house on the top of my head. So it's not in kind true, but it is a fairly flat shingle. Technically, under this list, it would go as a major alteration to the commission. So that is first before permitting. You have to have the entitlement permission through planning before getting a permit. The permit won't be issued unless you have that entitlement.
Okay.
However, we haven't discussed cedar to comp shingle. There may be a different process that's defined for that very, very specific case because it is such a different issue. And in fact, it's difficult to insure properties with cedar shingles anymore. So that one might be slightly different.
So that, it helps me. So the minor administrative, it just goes through the normal processes through the permitting here. If you're doing any major kind of alterations, like you had said, then it goes through the city normal processes and then comes here to the commission.
Yeah, the commission is the body that provides approval or denial. With the administrative minor process, it's staff that provides approval or denial.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah, and I'm involved in those types of project as staff. A planner sends those to the city architect team, which I'm on. City architect sends to me, and I'm involved in those reviews.
Okay, because I guess I feel like when we start to kind of go out to the communities and start talking about this, that's going to be I assume people are going to ask that question,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I think the question I had was that every single time they want to do something within the historical district, they do not have to come, one more step of coming through here. And I think that
Correct.
that's, okay.
Yes, it's important to know the distinctions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I guess I think this will probably be answered, or maybe we could do it at the end with some of this episode. Now that the survey is done, I don't know if, did it get approved by the city council?
It did,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
City Council adopted the resolution on August 19th.
Okay, I think I was out of town, that's why I couldn't go to it. I was, and didn't follow up. So great, that's great. And then, so I guess what is the future for us now? How do we proceed, or is that another workshop going to?
Right. No. Let's just quickly go back to this one, just real quick, so we have it on the screen. So next step for some will be designation, and that would be individual properties that want to be designated or people in historic districts. So for those in historic districts who are interested in being designated, staff does need to work with the community to do that. The petition is a process, and it's usually really good to have a neighborhood leader take charge of that and work with staff on, finding out the interest in the community and taking a petition around and gaining signatures. And so we're happy to talk about that with folks and facilitate that process. As you can see by this table, for landmarks or for the districts, anyone can initiate landmarks. For the districts, it needs to be someone is an property owner in the district, the commission, or a city agency. And then for the planning districts to move forward, they don't get designated, but they do get this identification as a conservation overlay zone, which is important. And that has to be initiated by the commission. So that would be something for the commission to consider if you wanted to move forward any of those. Because also after that happens, then we are able to draft design guidelines, and that would be very helpful for people to know just exactly what they can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do, when it comes to making modifications or restoration work.
So our next, the historical districts that were called out in the survey, now that the survey has been approved through all the commissions and city council here, is our next step is to start getting those true designations by going through the 51% of homeowners in that area, correct?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, and then other things, though, that you might face, and hopefully we can bring this back as the next workshop, would be going a bit deeper in the design review. We've been able to talk about it quite a lot, and I'm sure there's some understanding, but again, that buildable layers, And next time, maybe we can bring forward some real good examples of what we're talking about, put some pictures to the topic, and, talk about what's appropriate, what's not, what goes through this process, what's not, so we can really get a really good understanding, because those will start to come before the commission, even before designation, because what I didn't say for the minor administrative review, or the ones that are just on the inventory, at any time the director can decide to elevate that to the commission. So those could come forward. And certainly we have designated properties on our register, so any of those could come forward at any time.
And one final question, I promise, is when is the timeline to start the process to get those signatures and people involved for those designations?
Anytime, and no deadline whatsoever. So the process can take as long as it needs to take. Once it's initiated and submitted as a designation application, then it has its own legs. It goes through the city process, and will get reviewed by staff, agendized to the commission, et cetera. So that'll have its own legs once it goes to that point. But it can, take as long as it needs to take. Community education is important. If some folks in one of our potential historic districts want to come forward and, give planning department a call and ask staff, about more details about this process, or if, they want to have a community meeting or something, we can certainly facilitate that and help them.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner DeVrant. Commissioner Urena.
I don't have any questions. I think you more than answered a lot of the questions that were brought up. I'm just really looking forward to some of these identified communities and hopefully reaching that 51%. And hopefully the momentum just keeps moving forward, and some of the communities see the passion and the work that was put into all of this by everybody. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Urena. I believe we have comments from our chair.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. As mentioned in roll call, Chairperson Lubisic could not attend the meeting tonight, but wanted to provide some comments and questions. First item being clarification of the process for Mills Act applications, discussion of the fee so that the commission members know what is asked of residents. What is the nomination process that residents are to follow prior to submitting their application? What are the materials that a resident is expected to supply? What is the role of the city and staff in the evaluation of an application? Second item being community workshops for historic districts and Mills Act applications. So as mentioned by Jen, we do have those lined up for future meetings. The chair states the community needs to understand that the designation of a historic district is not a prerequisite to a Mills Act eligibility property. It might be best to offer workshops that specifically address Mills Act applications and to recruit applicants. And although the city just finished the survey process, that the city should consider broadening the discussion to the conservation overlay zone and planning districts. And these seems to be the most vulnerable areas in the city. And the chair would like to know how the city would be moving forward to protect the character of the planning districts in the survey. And that was briefly discussed this evening. Can share some of this. I can start with the first item, which is the fees for an applicant for a Mills Act application. That was an item that came before the Preservation Commission early on in one of the early meetings. The fee discussed at that time, what was presented was full cost recovery, so that was the staff time that's typically involved with processing an application from initial intake. And again, it involves taking in the application, making sure that all the submittal and application items are prepared as part of the application process. As Jen mentioned, it involves bringing on the city architect as well as the architectural historian to provide that professional feedback. Upon reviewing the application, it goes through the public hearing process as was discussed this evening and several rounds of it. So initially, the fee that was presented, it was relatively higher. I believe it was around maybe the $5,000 range. But that's equivalent to if staff were to process a conditional use permit or a variance application through the Planning Commission. It would be something similar to that effect, where just the time spent on reviewing an application. And typically, even for a minor house remodel, sometimes just reviewing a submittal, a plan submittal, it takes a few rounds, because typically the first rounds there are deficiencies within the plans, or maybe there are drafting errors. And I can say after more than 2 decades of doing this, that it's very rare that an initial application would be a perfect submittal. And typically there would be deficiencies of some kind, and intentional, non-intentional, it does take at least 2 or 3 and maybe more. And so that factors in all the staff time that is typically involved with just getting an application to a point where it can be presented to the city architect, to the city architectural historian, and then ultimately to come before the Preservation Commission, and then to end with the city council. So that is a lot of staff time. And then when it comes to timing, this is where the commission would hear from the public, oh, it takes 2 to 3 months or even to 6 months, and it's for this reason, just making sure that all the details, and in particular when it comes to design, it's a lot more involved than, for example, again, a conditional use permit for a beer and wine license, for example. And so at that time, the fee that was presented was equivalent to an application similar to one that would go to the Planning Commission. But by the time it was taken to the City Council, and in hearing feedback from the community and also from the Preservation Commission, it was reduced to approximately, I think, 2,600. So less than the initial amount that was presented to the Preservation Commission. So as I look here, the application fee for a Mills Act application, as I mentioned, is approximately $2,600 for designated properties for minor alteration reviews to come before the commission is approximately $1,800, and for a major alteration, it's approximately $3,500. So that number was reduced. And as more applications come in and the process gets more refined, these fees, staff can always go back and take a look at them. As mentioned by Jen, again, one of the incentives to encourage preservation is to look at these fees and to see whether or not they're reasonable and where adjustments can be made here and there. But it did come up before as to the cost of an application, but that's what typically is involved with the fee. As to the subsequent items, I guess I will turn it over to Jen, and she can provide more information about those.
Thank you, yes. And on the Mills Act one, I just wanted to see if we covered the process and the materials. Did you mention those, Sam? Okay, so let me just say, we do have a Mills Act Property Tax Program guidelines and application that's available online, and certainly a call to the Community Development Department can produce that as well for you. For any potential applicant. There is a schedule that is given in there. We used to not have a deadline to submit a Mills Act application according to the new guidelines, which were written in 2021. There's a June 30th deadline for submittal of a Mills Act application to the city. Those are processed July to August. And in the manner that Sam was describing. In September, planning review applications are reviewed. It does state in there that it's Planning Commission, so I'm not sure if that's an update that needs to be made to HPCR Commission, but October, City Council makes the final decision on approval or denial. And then contracts are signed usually November, December, so that the first of the year we're off and running, with the Mills Act. So that's just to get some broad timeline there to the process. And then in terms of what materials are required of property owners to produce or provide, so please, of course, refer to the guidelines for the complete list of materials and applications. But generally, there's a basic application. You do have to provide a maintenance, restoration, rehabilitation work plan, your plan for this 10-year work that you're going to be doing over the 10 years. There's a financial part to the application because you do have to show the potential savings and how you're going to be spending that savings. So that's part of it. And I know you have to provide the deed. A copy of the deed, because this is a recorded document. So other than that, I'm not sure. I don't think that there's other materials, but of course, please review the guidelines. And then, of course, I think the role of city and staff in the evaluation, it was already outlined, and I've been involved in the past and will continue to be. So the next point was community workshops for historic districts and Mills Act applications. I'd love to participate in those as well. Unfortunately, though, I do think I need to correct, or maybe it's a typo here, that our community needs to understand that the designation of a historic district is not a prerequisite to a Mills Act eligible property, but it actually is. The ordinance does state, and the Mills Act guidelines do state, that only designated properties are eligible for the Mills Act or any of our incentives. Very few cities actually allow anything but a designated property to be eligible for Mills Act or any incentive. That is usually almost always a prerequisite. So that's information to correct there, so we have a good understanding. And yes, although we've just finished the survey, I'm reading from Chair Lubasich's notes here. Although we've just finished the survey process, we need to broaden our discussion on conservation overlay zones and planning districts. So she's right, really, in saying that these are probably our most vulnerable areas. And I think we've had a good, robust review of that today. And thank you for your questions, Commissioner DeVrent, because that certainly helped round out that conversation, that discussion. So hopefully that was helpful to the commission and to the public. And then we can certainly have more. We talked about potentially elevating planning districts to historic districts, designated historic districts. And that's not always the goal of a planning district, I have to say. And just to keep sort of a status quo when it comes to historic character is also a very valuable goal. Not all planning districts can be elevated to historic districts. And it didn't cover the Mission District Planning District, which is a bit of a tough one to say because we have district twice there, but I do think of the three that were defined, the one with the greatest potential is the one we covered quite extensively, which is that San Gabriel Village. I think has the greatest potential. And I can look more into that and provide more information to the commission next time as well. I think that may cover Chair Lubasich's comments.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. So the Mills Act, in order to apply for the Mills Act, you have to be within a designated historic district, correct?
Or be the owner of a individually designated landmark. Or
It has to be designated.
It has to be designated, yes. You have to be on the register to qualify.
And to get on that register, you'd
You
have to
be
go through
designated.
go through that entire process. So the way the districts were identified in this survey, if there's a home that is just outside of that district and has the characteristics and could be, it wouldn't qualify.
No, it wouldn't. And so just kind of going back really quickly to, let's see, which direction, making sure I'm finding the right one. No, I think I'm back the other way. Apologize. Just give me one moment and I'll get this back up for you. Right. So in the case of San Gabriel Village Planning District, the reason that this is also defined, we didn't cover it in the presentation, but there's also a comprehensive intentional planning and development happening here in the San Gabriel Village Planning District. It's not the same situation when you're going outside the boundaries of this district. So we can't necessarily say that the ones on the fringe outside the red line were part of this village plan because they're also following track maps to identify which ones were part of the San Gabriel Village development. So the context for those may not fit in at all with the importance and the context of the planning district itself. So if they're not eligible to be contributors to the planning district, then they would have to be looked at to determine if they have individual eligibility. That was also covered under the survey quite extensively in phase 1. And generally there are a lot of properties that may not rise to the level of individual eligibility. They have enough, if they're combined with others, to collectively convey their significance, but not just because they're intact or they don't have alterations. They have to really be associated with the patterns of development over time, which represent the important historic events that are happening within the context identified in the survey. So let me give you an example that maybe doesn't specifically relate to San Gabriel, but say our historic context is residential suburban development 1920 to 1940. say. And we have a perfectly good intact, building outside of that, but it's maybe an infill. It doesn't relate to any kind of tract development. We don't. I'm guessing here. I'm just making things up just to prove a point. It doesn't necessarily follow that an intact property on the edge of a district should be included in that district. It has to really represent the historic context that the district does represent.
Thank you for that explanation. There's currently a home for sale on Roses Road that's outside of the Rosemont district, and it's advertised as the Patton Estate. So there is historical significance. It really does stand out because it is a large property. That would then have to be on the register in order for them to apply for the Mills Act, correct?
Yes, if it's not in the historic district, then it would have to be individually eligible for designation or to move forward to designation. I don't know the property, so I don't know if it's on the register now or even if it's been identified in the inventory. Perhaps it hasn't. Maybe you check that. But that is what would be needed in order for it to qualify for a preservation incentive.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining all of that. Now, going back to the 51% petition, just so that we move this along, because we tend to get stalled in this commission, if we can continue with this momentum, the signatures that are needed, the 51% signatures that are needed, it's a petition that will go around. Is that petition written by staff, or is it written by residents and approved by staff?
It's typically, if you can hear me over the siren, it's typically a petition that is initiated and circulated by community members, usually by a community leader of that neighborhood. It's certainly something that the city can facilitate, but it's not intended to be a city-driven aspect of designation, yeah.
Okay, so the language in this petition does not have to be approved by the city staff?
There is no language in the ordinance that requires city approval of that petition
Thank you.
in any way.
Thank you. Any other comments from our commissioners?
Just off from that last point, so the petition, so now that somebody knows that, hey, the Rosemont district, just because people are in a conversation, somebody in that community or in that area could make a petition and on their own, grassroots, 51%, bring it to the city?
Yes, that is correct. And I'm going to go back to this process here. And just to maybe round out my answer to the previous question, certainly where the city doesn't have authority over drafting the petition or what the petition says. However, it's certainly within the best interest of the community to draft a fair and clear petition, of course, because the next step after that is to have a public hearing here at the commission where the commission determines if we should move forward with even entertaining the idea of designating this district. That's not the hearing that designates the district. That's to determine if we should move forward. So when the commission were to review that petition, if you were to find discrepancies that should have been, noticed to the residents, or inaccuracies, or any sort of strong arming, or anything untoward, you would have the opportunity to decide maybe that it wasn't fairly conducted and that another petition should be done. That would be up to the commission. But that is where city involvement comes in, not prior to that point.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Urena, any comments? Any further comments?
No comments.
Thank you. Are there any public comments at this time? Do we have one public comment?
Yes, we have public comment. There's someone from the audience who would like to speak.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please state your name.
Cecilia Kiefer.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am willing to take the lead on circulating a petition in the Rosemont Park District, as I have, an interest in moving my Mills Act application further along. It's been stalled for a while. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated because it feels like the goalpost keeps moving here, and didn't think it was going to be taking years to get this done. But anyway, I also was a little apprehensive. I don't feel like there's been a lot of clarity, so I'm apprehensive about doing all this work and then finding out, oh, no, you should have collected an email address from everyone or a phone number or something. I do see that it says that the process can be initiated by the district or the city. I'm thinking maybe it is a good idea to have the city initiate it so that it doesn't get stalled any further. Make sure it's what the petition says what you want it to say. I did look at other examples from other cities to kind of get an idea. I do remember when my relative was joining a historic district in Pasadena and what that was like. So I feel like I have a little bit of information. I've also gone to Pasadena workshops. So I'm happy to do this. We're also coincidentally hosting a large neighborhood party next weekend, October the 18th, that celebrates the 100-year, birthday of Rosemont Park, since it started being established in 1925. And I've personally, with some other neighbors, have passed out 280 invitations. So, and we have a potluck sign up. And I think this would be a great opportunity to, set up a table, pass out some information, maybe collect some signatures. So I'm willing to do that. I just don't, like I said, I'm just a little apprehensive. I don't want to, invest a lot more time and then realize this is all for naught, or I'm just kind of spinning my wheels. So if you're saying that the petition is, doesn't require any particular language, and I've got the green light, then I can start that. Right. So I guess that's really my comment at this time.
Thank you, Cecilia. I so appreciate your dedication to your Mills Act application, and I really recognize all the time you've put into it and all the research you've done, and I really do appreciate that. I will say that while the preservation ordinance doesn't require staff to draft or review the petition, I'm not sure that there's anything that precludes us from reviewing it if that's what we would want to have done, and I'll leave that topic to the Community Development Director to address.
Okay.
Thank you for that comment. It is now 7:37. The time for public comment on this item is now closed. Are there any other comments from the commission?
I have one in regard to this event that's happening on October 18th. Commissioner Moraro, I don't want to take your thunder on this because I know you've been involved with this, but so I'll leave most of the comments to you. But my question was to have us as a commission have a table there or something to that effect to talk to people and answer questions. But I guess my question is there any violation on the Brown Act with that?
A concern would be to stay neutral, because ultimately designation is a discretionary process. And if the commission is going to be voting on an item, then it's best to keep from being directly involved to the extent of it influencing a decision.
So if we, this is happening, in our community, right? So on October 18th, if I show up with my historical commissioner's name tag and walk around, is that okay?
We have
What's that?
in that capacity, the staff would discourage that a little bit. However, as a property owner, absolutely. As somebody who has background and information of historical properties, architecture, then absolutely. But as a commission member, it'd be something that staff would discourage.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Now, we were using Rosemont District as an example because of this centennial celebration that's coming up. Is there any effort from the city to make these other districts aware of this process other than just our commission meetings? Is there a mailer that goes out? Is it posted on our city newsletter? What is the process there?
That would likely be the process, but we do want to approach that in a more organized way. So we are starting with just some very broad information this evening. But as mentioned by Jen, in order to go out to each individual district, which is unique in itself, we want to be able to inform property owners about their own district, what makes it unique, and then we can go over the general processes, but the notification letter for each area would likely be a little bit different from each other, only because the characteristics are different. And in order for property owners to understand what would be the incentive or the motivation for them to want to make an application or to initiate the the designation process, they need to understand the value and the resource of their property and their area. So eventually we would get to that point, but it is a very kind of systematic process that we're looking at. The next priority that staff is looking at would be would be looking at some of those design criterias. We can bring back to the commission maybe prioritizing some of the districts and which areas the commission would want to focus on. If the Fairview area is a priority, then that is where we will start working with the city architect to kind of look into the architectural style of the area. And then starting with that area, so as far as which area to prioritize, to even come up with the design guidelines, work with the city architect on that, work with the city's architectural historian, bring that item to the commission to review and to discuss, and what would help to bring back restoring the area. So each area, again, is very unique in itself. The process, the notification will also be very unique in itself. But as the commission has seen this evening, it's a lot of information, both in characteristics of the areas of the districts, and then in the process itself, if an individual property or if a district had interest in pursuing the designation process. So it's just a lot of information, and we do have to take it step by step at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments? This brings us to agenda item 4, staff items.
The next item on the agenda, I may have missed it, but the second item is actually the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse Strategic Planning and Community Engagement Focus Group. So with this particular item, the action from the commission, a vote is not required, just a consensus amongst the commissioners. And essentially, the Community Services Department retained the services of the Arts Consulting Group to assist with the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse Strategic Planning and Community Engagement. And the Community Service Department has requested that 2 commissioners be selected this evening to represent the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission for any future focus group discussions, and then to bring those items and updates back to the commission throughout the process. The representative will assist in providing a perspective on the history and heritage of the Playhouse in the city for future programming purposes. So in that capacity, whoever is selected would be representing the commission in that case. And the meeting dates and times at this point have not been set, but once the members are selected, then the individuals would be contacted by either community service staff or the arts consulting group. So the second comment provided by the chair, she did indicate that she does want to make sure that the commission is well represented in the process, as the Playhouse is on the National Register of Historic Places, and interior elements are important and part of the nomination of the history of the Playhouse, and that she would like to represent or be a representative if the commission would consider her as one of the representatives.
Thank you. Commissioner DeBrandt, any comments?
I don't have any opposition to Chair Lubicic doing that for sure. So that would be, I don't know if we have to vote on that or if it's just
Just a consensus.
that's for that. And I don't know how many you're looking, but I would do it as well if you need the next person, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Rena, any comments?
No comments. I'm willing to do the same. I mean, do we have to basically nominate? Or
No, just ultimately come to a conclusion who the 2 members would
the
be.
two?
Thank you. So I believe Chair Lubicic is wanting to be on this, as a representative of the commission, and I agree. I think she'd be very worthy of that, and she's actually probably got more information than a lot of us. But now, could it be 3, or is it just 2?
2 only because then it triggers the Brown Act and
Oh,
public
correct.
notification, yes.
Correct, thank you. Commissioner DeVrant, Commissioner Rena, you both stated you'd want to be a representative of the commission. Would,
That's good. If Commissioner Urena wants to do it, that's fine. My wife is on the commission anyway, so I can, I get information, but yes, if you want to go ahead.
thank you. That would make you, Commissioner Rena, a representative along with Chair Lubicic.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that. So now this moves us to item 5, which is staff items.
Yes, no updates, Vice Chair.
Thank you. So this brings us to item 6. Each commissioner may address the commission on matters of general information and/or concern. This is also the time for commissioners to report on conferences and/or meetings they have attended. Commissioner DeVrant.
I have nothing tonight.
Commissioner Rena.
I have nothing to report.
I would just like to invite everybody to that centennial for the Rosemont District on October 18th. It's an afternoon, potluck, just, pass if you can. It would be wonderful. And that is all I have to comment on that. Any other comments from anyone? No? Okay, so we adjourn this meeting to the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission on our next meeting is on December 10th, 2025, at 6:30 p.m. at City Hall, here in the chambers.